Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Hello, my friends. It's Lynda Lippin here, your host for the Pilates Goddess podcast. Welcome back, and thank you, as always, once again, for spending some time listening to me talk to you about really all the things related to Pilates, to fitness, to wellness, and if you're a Pilates teacher, to helping you run your Pilates business. Today, I'm giving you a really basic episode because today's episode is what is Pilates? And the reason why I'm kind of closing out this year with what seems like such a simple topic is because I see this coming up a lot in Pilates teacher Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups, as well as in groups that are geared towards Pilates clients. So the question that I see a lot is, well, is Pilates really strength training? Is Pilates really all about stretching? What can Pilates do for the body? How does Pilates fit in with other forms of exercise? Do we have to do all this rolling around on our backs in Pilates? And frankly, I think a lot of people don't even know the history of Pilates. So that is what I am discussing in today's episode. So let's just start out with a little bit of my history of how I got to Pilates, because, that could be interesting to you and will help kind of inform really the rest of the discussion. So I was an undergraduate at SUNY Purchase, now known as Purchase College, back in the late 80s. And in my senior year, I was the VP or coordinator of finance for student government. And at that point, there was not a lot of funding for the arts and humanities. And I decided to go in and see what the Pilates studio was doing. Purchase has a big dance department. Purchase had a dedicated Pilates studio from the minute it opened in the dance department. But at that point of the late 80s, student government was funding the Pilates studio. The dance department was no longer involved. And the Pilates studio served faculty, served staff, served the surrounding area of the suburbs, and also served students. And students got really great pricing, right? Because our student activity fee was helping to fund the studio. So the first thing I did was I went in to see what they were doing with their money. Like, I had no idea what Pilates was. Steve Giordano was running the Pilates studio at the time. He and I were undergrads together. He was a dance major. And Steve kept coming in with budget requests, to build more equipment, to do a little more marketing, to do other things. And I was like, I have no idea what any of this is. Now, although I was a philosophy major undergrad and ended up going to Temple to graduate school to continue studying that, I had also been a dancer, and specifically a ballet dancer, for most of my life. My mom took me to ballet class when I was I think 3 or 4 years old, and I loved it. And I just kind of kept going with that. So I did have some ideas about movement. I did enjoy moving. And I walked into that Pilates studio and took my first class and fell in love. I was sore, but in all the right places. I found some stuff really hard, but could see where it could be really fun and really effective. I loved the equipment. I just loved like the whole thing. The whole thing was awesome for me. And I kept going. I became a dedicated client. I spent a lot of time in the studio. When I was really, stressed out is senior year around my GREs, around, doing my grad school applications, going to visit the places where I was accepted, running student government, doing all the things. I would even just pop into the studio for 5 or 10 minutes and maybe get on the high barrel and do some swans, or get on the reformer and do some footwork. And I always, always, always felt better after and for having done that. So when I graduated and I moved to Philly, I still practiced mat. Okay. Steve made sure that when I left the studio at Purchase, I had the mat, the order of the mat kind of ingrained in me. And I practiced it, and I practiced it very often. I also started when I was in graduate school to get a little more into weight training, a little more into like dance aerobics, because that was kind of big in the late 80s, early 90s. And in my second year of graduate school, there was an ad in the city paper. This was 1989. And the ad in the Free City paper, want ads, said exercise instructors wanted, part-time, Pilates background preferred. Now understand that in 1989, there were no Pilates certification programs, okay? And ACE and NASM and a lot of these other programs were kind of coming up in the fitness world. IDEA was actually very big then. But certification was not a buzzword in the way it is today. There was no PMA. There was none of this existed. So I applied. And when I went in, I was actually the only person to apply who had any idea what Pilates was or what the Pilates apparatus was. And I was lucky enough to get this job where I was working with private clients. We only did one-on-ones in a sports medicine podiatrist's office. And he was the sports medicine podiatrist for the Eagles and the Sixers and the Pennsylvania Ballet, and also handled a bunch of unions. So I saw all kinds of interesting clients very early on. And I was lucky enough to be working alongside Karen Carlson. And if you don't know Karen Carlson, I recommend that you look her up on the Google and read a little bit about her and her background. But she had at that point studied mostly with Mary Bowen, came to Pilates with a very movement informed, dance informed, Bowen informed lens. And I was so, so lucky. And I am grateful every single day for being able to spend that time with Karen and learning from her, watching her teach, being taught by her, and, working in that very private, very close space, getting to work with professional ballet dancers, getting to work with professional athletes, getting to work with people of all shapes and sizes. Early in my career was really, really good and really helpful. And I kind of took it from there. At some point, I realized that academia was not really what I wanted, that academia was pretty toxic. especially in philosophy, that, there wasn't a lot of funding. There was a lot of sexism. There was a lot of racism. There was a lot of sexual harassment, that we were all just supposed to suck up. And frankly, I reached a point where I didn't want to be moving all over the country trying to get tenure track positions until I found some place that I liked, where I could handle being, that wanted to give me tenure. And I had a client who had been in back pain, forever. And we got him out of back pain. I got him out of back pain, along actually with my friend Alan Menezes, who is the guy who brought Pilates to Australia, to the Southern Hemisphere. And he's been a podcast guest here on more than one occasion. So take a look at, the rest of the shows. And I actually have an interview with him coming up as well. So I opened a studio, and I was still in graduate school, right? So I did, finish that. And the studio ended up doing really, really well. We opened up on the main line of Philadelphia. So we were in an area that was a high income area, a high net worth area. We had a lot of golfers. We had a lot of folks with back pain, with neck pain, and people who had the means to really want to deal with it. Going to the gym and the whole kind of group fitness thing wasn't quite as big as it is now. So people were interested in the personal training. They loved the equipment, and, that moved forward. We started our own teacher training program. We just continued to grow. And when I left that first studio and opened my second studio, again, studio did really, really well. That's when I started doing teacher training for the Physical Mind Institute. I was a founding member there, and, just kept teaching the work, doing the work, and helping people feel better. Now, during this time was when, number one, Sean Gallagher started suing people because he had purchased the Pilates estate and now owns the Pilates trademark. And people were starting to create more dedicated kind of teacher training programs. You have to understand that prior to the 90s, most teacher training was really done in a relatively informal kind of apprenticeship, where you spent a lot of time at the studio, you did a lot of classes, you hung out. This is part of what I did at Purchase, and then part of what I did with Karen Carlson. And then, the mentor teacher who you were doing this apprenticeship with one day would say, "Great, you are good to go," and kind of release you into the world of teaching. And at that point, we would all kind of identify ourselves by our path back to Joe Pilates. Literally. I learned from so-and-so who learned from so-and-so who learned from Joe Pilates, right? So we would all kind of trace it back. I'm also, you may or may not know, a Usui Reiki master teacher, and we do the same thing in Usui Reiki, right? We trace all of our training back to him. So after all of these years of teaching, and I worked with physical therapists, I worked with pelvic floor specialists, I worked with the joint replacement people at Rothman Institute. We dealt with Parkinson's disease. I worked with folks with spinal cord injuries, lots of like osteoporosis, all kinds of stuff, right? Because people would simply get the word of mouth that, their friend came here with their back thing and they were feeling better. So, why not go? And why not try it? I grew the studio by doing teacher training and then hiring the people who I trained as well, as a few other people who had been trained in other places, but again, through lineages that I recognized. I ended up getting my first paper certification from the Physical Mind Institute, or from the Institute for the Pilates Method, in 1993, signed by Michelle Larson, Eve Gentry, and Joan Breitbart. And I have been a member of and continued maintaining that certification for 3 decades. Plus, I'm also a certified personal trainer. And I feel like those things kind of go really well together and give me, kind of the credentials that people like to see moving forward. So now let's just talk about what Pilates actually is based on, my background of knowing Pilates and probably my background as a philosophy professor as well. Pilates is an exercise method. It was developed by a man named Joseph Pilates. It is a full body exercise method. It is an exercise method that works on strength, that works on stabilization, that works on mobility, that works on endurance, that works on all the things. Joseph Pilates himself was a sickly child, asthma, rickets, growing up in Germany, people making fun of him, foreign last name. We can all imagine what that was like. And he started studying, Greek gymnastics, started reading old anatomy books, started looking at how animals moved. And so by the time World War I happened, when he was interned as an enemy alien, he was German, on the Isle of Man for that entire war, he was kind of ready. He was ready with some exercises that people could be doing in a small space without a lot of equipment needed and without a lot of space needed to keep themselves moving and in shape. And that's what he did while he was in the camp. When they finally got out of the camp, after Germany made its first reparations payment after the war, Pilates went back to Germany. And he there really started to experiment with springs, right? He kind of viewed springs as almost mimicking muscles, as in a way also mimicking spine in terms of length, strength, eccentric contractions, concentric contractions. These things can lengthen, they can shorten, they move levers around. He looked at the body with very much of an engineering perspective, saw how when things were out of whack, when they were out of balance around a joint, around the spine, around any area, it would kind of throw everything else off. And so he put together his own system of exercises, as well as developing his own apparatus for the exercises, in order to give everybody the opportunity to have balance, strength, and flexibility, to have solid powerhouse or core strength, to be able to breathe well, and basically to be able to do whatever we needed to do in our lives with, as he would say, spontaneous zest and pleasure. So, my friends, I think we all know that recovery from any injury or surgical procedure can be a super long process. And frankly, as I get older, it seems to take even longer. But it's really crucial that we come through these things as fast and strong as possible. I know as an expert that in order to recover faster and stronger, it's really vital to maintain muscle mass and strength, even through periods of the rest that we need in recovery. And proper nutrition actually accelerates the body's ability to repair itself. The great news is that I have discovered Amino Co. and I have discovered their patented formula of essential amino acids called HEAL. HEAL is clinically proven to improve recovery from injuries or surgery. It was originally formulated, in fact, for astronauts at NASA to maintain their muscle mass in space. And now you and I can use this technology at home. Amino Co's products were created by former Harvard professor and world renowned clinical researcher, Dr. Wolf. These are science backed supplements, and they, in fact, taste good. I drink the sour apple natural version of Heal, and frankly, I love it. This formula is patented, science backed, and it's literally an amino acid blend. There is nothing in there that's going to hurt you. This will only help you. This amino acid blend is designed to improve strength, function, and performance, and helps reduce inflammation levels in the body. You can check out the science and check out the product by visiting aminoco.com. That's AMINOCO.com/goddess. And since you're listening to this right before Black Friday, I'm letting you know that the Black Friday sale is in effect. And that means that when you use the code GODDESS, you will save 40%. Yes, my friends, that is 40%. I really encourage you to try it. I'm having a great experience with Heal. And again, just head on over to aminoco.com, aminoco.com/goddess, and use the code goddess to save 40% on Heal during Amino Co's Black Friday sale. And Joseph Pilates, taught everybody. He taught dancers, he taught athletes, he taught housewives, he taught teachers. He believed that if everybody did his exercises, if everybody felt better, moved better, functioned better, had more endurance, had better strength and mobility, and didn't have back pain or other pains, that everybody would be able to focus more on their jobs, focus more on each other, focus more on building a fabulous society. And he, really went out there and tried to sell his work as much as he could. Today, we have basically so many workouts out there that say that they are the only thing or the best thing. And we also have different versions of Pilates that are out there, some of which are, much more strength-based, that use different heavier equipment, heavier resistance. We also have a lot of Pilates out there that is all about stretching and all about mobility. And none of that is what Joseph Pilates himself was teaching, or what Joseph Pilates himself envisioned for his work. In fact, it almost takes away from the work to try to box it into just a dancer workout, just a strength workout, just a flexibility workout. Pilates is all about function, and it's about proper function of the body. Pilates is not all done lying down. In fact, you can do an entire Pilates class or an entire Pilates session, even with mat work at home, standing up or sitting on a chair. Yes, all of the Pilates apparatus is, relatively heavy and involves springs for resistance. But we are also lucky enough to be living in a time where um, latex rubber and non-latex variants are available. So we have a lot of resistance tubing, resistance bands, door anchors, and all kinds of things that can mimic springs and can mimic what you do with the Pilates apparatus. Joseph Pilates also developed a lot of small equipment, right? So we have the foot corrector, we have the toe corrector, which, people use, the fat kind of broccoli rubber bands for. He developed the magic circle. He, developed a lot of small things. He also used light weights in the studio relatively often. And so there's a whole host of things that can be easily incorporated into any Pilates workout. Now, if you're listening to this as a Pilates teacher, this is where, if you're a teacher who, say, only knows mat or only knows mat and reformer, I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the entire Pilates system. Now, look, in the best of all possible worlds, you would take a whole nother bridge certification and training and learn the whole system. However, I know that that's not really practical or will work for many people. So what I encourage you to do is find the live or online educational opportunities that will introduce you to the system in a non-judgmental and, comprehensive way. My Pilates Teacher Mastermind programs do that. I literally have an entire series of workshops that just takes you through with demonstrations the entire system, beginning, intermediate, and advanced on mat and all of the apparatus. Mara over at PilatesEncyclopedia.com has something very similar. Leslie Logan, Online Pilates, again, has something very similar. So Andrea Maida, who has a beautiful blog, has tons of YouTube videos and free blog posts where she outlines the entire system. So there are, plenty of resources ranging from free to, maybe $100. Seriously, none of this is super expensive, that will allow you to immerse yourself in the entire system. And the reason why I encourage you to do this as a teacher is it's going to give you more of a sense of really what Pilates can do and, what it's meant to do. If you're listening to this as a Pilates client or someone who's interested in doing Pilates, but you're just not sure if Pilates is going to work for you, you're not sure if Pilates is really going to give you the strength training and endurance that you need, I'm also here to tell you that it will. But you need to make sure that you are going to a teacher that has enough experience and, again, understands the entire system of Pilates, so that even if you are just doing, mat work with bands and a roller and a magic circle at home, or whether you have apparatus or are going into a studio, right, that your teacher is really teaching you full body strengthening. Okay. I recently read a study that just came out last week that the researchers were shocked that doing Pilates helped increase long COVID patients' lung capacity by over 30% in just 8 weeks. You heard me. You heard that right. Lung capacity increased over 30% over 8 weeks with long COVID patients who were experiencing shortness of breath. This, my friends, is exactly what I would expect and exactly what Joseph Pilates would have expected, right? Because the powerhouse muscles, my friends, that we are primarily starting with in Pilates, right? So that the body gets a chance to kind of organize from the center out. Those powerhouse exercises are strengthening the muscles that assist us in breathing. Sometimes, we sit there and we go, they're so focused on the fucking breathing in that Pilates class. You know why? Because our abdominal muscles, our back muscles, our pelvic floor muscles, and our diaphragm muscles are all involved in breathing. All of them. And that is basically the entire powerhouse. With those muscles, we could even add in maybe the glutes, right? Maybe the inner thighs. Okay. We can maybe add in some of the back muscles, right? Your lats, and definitely your serratus and the muscles that are bringing your rib cage together. And Pilates works first and primarily on those muscles, on getting the breathing apparatus working properly, on getting the spine aligned, on getting the rib cage moving, on improving the posture so that your spine is lifted up and your rib cage is lifted up to make it easier to breathe. Okay. To strengthen the upper back muscles so that the shoulders are able to drop away a little bit from the ears without having to be pushed down into the rib cage to the point where, again, it restricts our ability to breathe or overstretches our necks. Pilates is also infinitely variable and modifiable. Okay. You have osteoporosis or a whole lot of neck and shoulder stuff. You don't have to curl your head up for the ab work. Okay. You got some disc herniations going on in your lumbar spine. You don't have to do all of the rounding of your spine in Pilates and all of the flexion. You're somebody like me who has vertebrae and disc deterioration in their cervical spine that leads to sometimes electric shock feelings in my index finger and my thumb on the right. And I don't do any inversions. Okay. There can be a lot of inversions in Pilates. We roll like a ball. We open like rock. We do seal. We do crab. We do short spine stretch. We do long spine stretch, jackknife. There's a lot. Tower. I don't do those. However, there's so many fucking exercises in Pilates that it doesn't matter that I don't do those. Not doing those helps my neck and shoulders and my arm and my hand feel great all the time. And there's thousands of other things for me to be doing. Pilates also incorporates, and I talk about this a lot and have for years, basic strength training movements. Basic strength training movements. We do squats. We do standing footwork. We do supine footwork. We do seated footwork on the chair. Okay? We do them. We do push-ups. We do planks. We do side planks. We do bridging. We do versions of deadlifts. We do versions of lat pulls. We do versions of Supermans. We do versions of all of these things. They all show up in the Pilates work. So I think it's really only maybe in the last 10 years where everyone's spinning and crossfitting and kettlebelling and doing all of these other things and then trying to figure out where to fit Pilates, that Pilates has, kind of fallen out as a major strength training, mobility, and all the things kind of exercise program, right? Now everyone's going to spinning for the cardio, and they're going here for the strength training, and they're coming to Pilates most of the time for something mellower or to undo the damage that the other programs are doing. But I'm letting you know that I do Pilates right now as my primary strength training, and I'm fine. And I've got a lot of clients that do Pilates with me online, using body weight, using bands, using household furniture, using magic circles, using rollers. And they are all having improved bone density, improved strength, and less pain. So Pilates really can be a one-stop shop if you want it to be. But if you're going to do Pilates as your only thing, then you really do need exposure to the full gamut of the system and what the system offers. And again, you can get this full gamut from teachers online. You can get this full gamut from teachers in the studio. Where you may not get this full gamut of what Pilates is, and I'm just going to go there, are in actually some of the fastest growing studios. And the reason for that is that they've taken some things out of Pilates in order to teach larger groups and larger classes, or they've completely changed the Pilates equipment, right? And are teaching choreography that is very specific to, say, the megaformer. So if you're somebody who is going to a club Pilates chain studio, which is fine. I mean, they're everywhere. The work is not bad. If you're going to a Legree studio or any of the other megaformer studios, all good. But all I want you to understand is that you are not getting exposed to the full gamut of what the actual work that Joseph Pilates created on the equipment which he made. You're not getting exposed to the full gamut of what that work can do for your body. And the thing is once you're exposed to what the full gamut is, then you'll be much more able to mimic that if you don't want to go to a studio. So, for my clients who are doing Pilates with me at home online, I can see a distinct difference between the folks who had been going to a Pilates studio for years and now have just shifted to working with me online, because they'll say things as we're working like, oh, this is like that exercise on the Cadillac, or, oh, this is like when I do leg springs here, or, oh, this is like the short box, or, and if you're listening to this and you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm just throwing out Pilates exercise names. Or, oh, this is like chest expansion, or, oh, this is like thigh stretch. And so we start to, kind of put together that we are actually doing the same work, right? But using bands or tubing or other things that we have at home versus the springs on the dedicated Pilates equipment. So Pilates, my friends, is a full body exercise program. Pilates can be anaerobic in terms of being a strength training and mobility program. Pilates also can be aerobic. There is, in fact, aerobic Pilates. There is a jump board that attaches to the reformer. There is faster paced work that you can do standing, sitting, or with the Pilates apparatus that will cause you to not only break a sweat, but also to be a little bit out of breath and feel your heart beating faster, which is what you want. from cardiovascular conditioning. And Pilates can help you, like my friend Alicia calls Pilates cross training for life, because it's really cross training your body and making sure that your body is ready for whatever life is going to throw at you in a given day. And what I find is that most people who I work with don't always feel ready. But once they learn the kind of simple basics of the core strength, the spine lengthening, the work on posture, the work on breathing, the work on standing tall, the work on the powerhouse that is inherent in the Pilates system, they start feeling and functioning better almost immediately. And that's really, all I want for myself, all I want for you, all I want for everybody. And it's really what Joseph Pilates wanted as well, was that we should all be feeling and functioning at our best. That's it, that we should just be feeling and functioning at our best on a daily basis, because you never know what kind of shit's going to happen. Remember, Joseph Pilates went through the war. He went through the post-war. He went through immigrating to the US. He went through, fires in his studio. He went through all kinds of stuff. He was a smoker. He smoked cigars. He was a drinker. And guess what? He was still in better shape and feeling and functioning better than most humans walking around today. So I'm going to leave you with that, because I think that that's kind of awesome. And if you get anything out of today's podcast, it should be that if you are teaching Pilates, Pilates is a one-stop strength, endurance, mobility, and cardiovascular shop. And you should treat it as such. And if you are somebody who's interested in exploring Pilates, you're thinking about doing Pilates, or you're a Pilates client, keep going with that. Keep doing it. And if you really, really love it, don't feel like you can't just do Pilates, because you really can, and you'll be just fine. So once again, my friends, thank you so, so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be releasing an episode on Thursday on Thanksgiving, so you will be seeing that episode drop if you are subscribed or following the podcast. So I encourage you to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you love it, please, please, please go to Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify and leave a rating, and if you can, a written review. Thank you so much again, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.